By 1900, the United States was the leading industrial power in the world, manufacturing more than its leading rivals, Great Britain, France, or Germany. Several factors contributed to the rapid growth of the U.S. economy, which was about 4% per year. We will look at those causes next and then analyze the effects of said growth. As noted, several causes led to the rise of the American economy in the late 19th century. The steam revolution of the 1830s through the 1850s replaced horse and manpower, allowing for improved productivity and further technological advances. Steam power did not require the user to be close to water or have a large water source, allowing production to happen throughout the nation. The combination of business leadership, capital, technology, markets, labor, and government support was evident in the development of the nation's first big business, the railroad. After the Civil War, the railroad mileage increased more than five-fold in a 35-year period. Railroads created a market for goods that was national in scale, encouraged mass production, mass consumption, and economic specialization. The resources used in railroad building promoted the growth of other industries, especially coal and steel. The most important effect of the railroads was the creation of the modern stockholder corporation. The development of complex structures in finance, business management, and the regulation of competition soon followed. Technological innovations also helped drive the economy at the turn of the century. Inventions such as the telegraph, telephone, typewriter, and the like became essential tools for business, while Thomas Edison's work at Menlo Park and George Westinghouse's inventions, including his electric current transformer, allowed production to flourish. Also connected to the railroad construction and agrarian technology was Henry Bessemer's contribution to Carnegie and the city of Pittsburgh with his Bessemer process. The process made the production of steel quicker and much cheaper. The refrigerated railroad cars and the packing industries gave Americans the opportunity to store food and improve their nutrition with out-of-season goods. The development of labor-saving technologies and an efficient patent system increased productivity. The federal government granted more than 440,000 new patents from 1860 to 1890. Additionally, shopping became an American pastime with the advent and attainability of the consumer society, marked by marketing powerhouses such as R.H. Macy, Marshall Field, and Sears and Roebuck. Additional factors included an abundance of an unskilled and semi-skilled labor force. Europe was overcrowded, wrought with famine and disease, war-torn, and lacked freedoms America could offer. Business tycoons such as Carnegie and Rockefeller advertised in Europe for laborers with the promise of jobs, housing, nourishment, and most importantly, freedom. The labor supply was supplemented yearly by the hundreds of thousands of immigrants arriving from Eastern and Southern Europe, along with China and Japan. Capital was also plentiful as Europeans with surplus wealth joined well-to-do Americans in investing in the economic expansion. Talented entrepreneurs like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan emerged during the era, who were able to build and manage vast industrial and commercial enterprises. To continue, a growing population due to the emergence of European and Asian immigration, along with an advanced transportation network, made the United States the largest market in the world for industrial goods. Businesses benefited from friendly government policies that protected private property, subsidized railroads with land grants and loans, supported U.S. manufacturers with protective tariffs, refrained from regulating business operations, and limited taxes on corporate profits. Lastly, the country was a treasure house of raw materials essential to industrialization, such as coal, iron ore, copper, lead, timber, and oil. The idea of government regulation of business was alien to the prevailing economic, scientific, and religious beliefs of the late 19th century. The economic expression of these beliefs was summed up in the phrase laissez-faire. Laissez-faire simply means leave it alone. In regards to the entrepreneurs of the era, the belief was there should be no government involvement in the market. These individuals felt competition should happen freely with little to no regulation. Regulation would occur by the law of supply and demand. Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection in biology offended the beliefs of many religious conservatives, but it bolstered the views of economic conservatives. Led by English social philosopher Herbert Spencer, some people argued for social Darwinism, the belief that Darwin's ideas of natural selection and survival of the fittest should be applied to the marketplace. Spencer believed that concentrating wealth in the hands of the fit benefited everyone. An American social Darwinist, William Sumner of Yale University, argued helping the poor was misguided because it interfered with the laws of nature and would only weaken the evolution of the species by preserving the unfit. Social Darwinism gave some during this period the scientific justification for racial intolerance. Race theories about the superiority of one group over others would continue to produce problems throughout the century. While possible through a strong work ethic and timing, the self-made man and the rags to riches examples were rare, at least in the case of reaching upper class status. Opportunities for upward mobility typically required prerequisites of race, religion, and social background. The typical upper class individual was white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and male. With that being said, the middle class began to grow with middle management, public official, and professional positions available. As more money was introduced into circulation, more jobs were created. Unfortunately, wage workers barely made enough to make ends meet, forcing child labor as a necessity. Housing and sanitation for this group was often poor, and social mobility was unlikely. The late 19th century witnessed a major shift in the nature of industrial production. Many factories had concentrated on producing textiles, clothing, and leather products. After the Civil War, a second industrial revolution resulted in the growth of large-scale industry and the production of steel, petroleum, electric power, and the industrial machinery to produce other goods. Big business, in order to combat competition, used pools. Pools were agreements between railroad companies to keep prices at a certain level. The goal was to regulate the railroad industry and keep production costs low. Typically, members of these pools would cut prices below the agreed upon fare and steal the market. The government responded with the Interstate Commerce Act, which stated rates were to be reasonable and just. The Interstate Commerce Commission was established as a regulatory agency to monitor the railroads to ensure they complied. The Interstate Commerce Act was the first federal law to regulate private industry. Trusts were formed to combine many companies of the same product of service under one company, thus limiting competition. A trust is a legal arrangement that allows one person to manage another person's property. The person who manages that property is called a trustee. Instead of buying a company outright, stockholders give their stocks to a group of trustees. Members of a trust receive shares in that trust, which entitles them to a portion of the trust's profits. The trustees could then control a group of companies as if they were one large merged company. The first company to merge into one large company was Standard Oil in 1882, led by J.D. Rockefeller. In order to maximize profits, big business owners like Carnegie and Rockefeller used horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontal integration brings all of the same type of industry together under one company, as we noted before with Standard Oil. The company grows by buying its competitors and satisfies horizontal integration. By using vertical integration, men like Carnegie and Gustavus Swift controlled all aspects of manufacturing, thus cutting out the middleman, keeping costs low and maximizing profits. For instance, in the case of Carnegie, in order for Carnegie to produce steel, he needed coal for energy, iron ore as a major component in the makeup of steel, and a means to ship his product. Instead of paying costly fees to each company, he bought the coal mines, iron mines, and railroads. Using this model, the costs became minimal, especially since wages for the working class were poor. During the Progressive Era, the federal government, operating as it had throughout the Gilded Age of the late 1800s, accepted a great deal of criticism for allowing big business to grow enormous wealth with little or no regulation. During the 1850s and 1860s, the federal grant system gave railroad companies more than 120 million acres of public land. Several railroads received enough land to cover most of the cost of building their lines. The great wealth many railroad entrepreneurs acquired in the late 1800s led to accusations that they had built their fortunes by swindling investors and taxpayers, bribing officials, and cheating on their contracts and debts. The term robber baron was coined to demonstrate a group of individuals who created a standard of living on the backs of the workers while using questionable practices to amass their wealth. Let's look at a few cases that attempted to regulate trusts. Munn v. Illinois decided states can regulate businesses within their borders. Challenges were made claiming the decision violated the 14th Amendment, but the ruling was upheld until Wabash, St. Louis, and Pacific Railroad Company versus Illinois. In Wabash, the rights of the states to control interstate commerce were limited. The federal government was then given the responsibility for economic affairs and established the Interstate Commerce Commission. Trusts came under widespread scrutiny in the 1880s as middle-class citizens feared the trust's unchecked power and urban elites resented the increasing influence of the new rich. After failing to curb trusts on the state level, reformers finally moved Congress to pass the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, which prohibited a contract combination in the form of trust or otherwise, or conspiracy in restraint of trade or commerce. Unfortunately, the wording was so vague and difficult to enforce, lawmakers will be forced to continue to tackle the issue throughout the Progressive Era. The E.C. Knight Company was a monopoly on sugar. The question arose, should the Sherman Antitrust Act suppress a monopoly in the manufacture and distribution of a good? In U.S. v. E.C. Knight Company, the Supreme Court ruled the Sherman Antitrust Act could be applied only to commerce, not to manufacturing. Furthermore, states were prohibited from discriminating against out-of-state goods. The case severely limited the federal government's power. As a result, the U.S. Department of Justice secured a few convictions until the law was strengthened later during the Wilson administration. And lastly, your essential question. At what cost did industrialization increase the standard of living for Americans? Don't forget to have specific evidence.